Hello and welcome to PHP Nuts. This is my first video for PHP Nuts, and someone told me that I would do better on YouTube if I had a webcam. So here it is, guys. Welcome to the channel. Let's get started. If you're new to PHP, then this probably isn't the video for you because you're a noob. I'm sorry, what? No, that was offensive. I apologize. Why would I say such a thing? And I'll tell you why. Because this video we're aiming at intermediate level PHP. That doesn't necessarily mean the code is particularly complicated, but it does mean you should already have a grasp over the basics of PHP, including how to create classes. And with that in mind, we're going to explore how we can create the best, most versatile PHP pure object that you will ever write. Because that's what it says in the title, right? Oh God, no pressure. Okay, what am I doing? Before we get started, I want to talk about IDEs. And I've seen a lot of people coding PHP in basic text editors such as Notepad++, Sublime, and for the love of God, don't get me started on Vim. If you're going to be even vaguely serious about your code, get a proper IDE. I've used a number over the years and now use PHP Storm, and I have to say that for coding PHP, it is without a doubt the best IDE out there. I'm not sponsored, by the way, but JetBrains, if you're watching this, I have at least 2 subscribers and I'm open to it. Okay, I'm open. Okay, let's get back to it. We're not going to be using a web server like Apache or Nginx in this video because we're just going to be using PHP Unit to implement test-driven development from within PHP Storm, and it will test our objects as we go. What we want is a base architecture that offers a common base for handling things like calculation-based objects, which are capable of mutating, accumulating data, and aiding with efficiency during execution, as well as being capable of consuming data from configuration files like JSON config files, and to be able to manage that data, or when managing and interfacing with data from databases. My God, that's a lot of stuff. And the object itself should not be capable of doing all those things because, you know, that would be ridiculous and it would break with the idea of single responsibility, something we'll probably cover in another video. But it should give us a solid common base architecture from which we can build those things. And that sounds awesome, right? Well, that's why this is the best object you will ever write. And actually, don't quote me on that, just in case. Okay, so we're going to be looking at using get methods, set methods, magic methods, the Iterator interface, the JsonSerializable interface, the count interface, and the importance of DocBlock. Whew, that's a lot to cover, so let's get cracking. Okay, so first thing we're going to need is a properties array. That's going to be a protected property of our basic object. So I shall just create that. Properties is equal to an array. It's an empty array. And our DocBlock is going to be auto-generated. So we want to be able to set that within our construct. Okay, and we're going to loose type this. They'll become obvious why later. And we're going to set the properties within a properties or set properties method. Okay, so properties goes in there, and we're going to create our. Okay, we'll add a DocBlock in here. I'm kind of hurrying along. I'm not going to really explain too much because you know, there's a lot to cover in this video, and I'm concerned that how long it's going to take, and you know, we need to move on fairly swiftly. So if you're struggling with anything within this video, please, you know, ask me in the comments below, and I'll try and answer any questions. Right. For now, I'm just going to assign the properties like this. This is cool, and I shall return itself. Whoops. Awesome, except for the fact that this DocBlock has auto-completed to this and to, sorry, basic object, and I actually want it to return this. So, yeah. Even though this is the type, it's important that I return this. I'll probably cover that in another video. Okay, so now we have set properties. We also want to be able to extract the properties. Function get properties. And that will always be an array. All right, so we got injection of properties, setting properties, and getting properties. I have set up a basic test here. So let's create a function here, test properties. This is my basic test. My object equals new basic object with an array of, let's put in first name, Bob, last name, Bobsworth. I don't know. I'm just making this up on the fly. Okay, age 20, that'll do. Right. Var dump our object out. Test properties. It's thinking, guys. It's thinking. Ta-da! Okay, right. We've got a object of type basic object with internal property structure. Happy days. So that's our test. Okay. Right. So we want to be able to test that this assert, for the time being, assert true is array object get properties, right? Just so we can pass a test. Boom, done. Moving on, we want to be able to get an individual property such as first name or last name, and we want to be able to set it too. So we're going to add those methods in. First function I'm going to use is get. That will be a name. And you know what? I'm going to say that if the name doesn't exist, I'm going to offer a default value. And we're going to do this if this is set, which doesn't exist, name. We're going to return this properties. Oops, name, or we're going to return default. Simple as that. Okay, so what we're saying here, I'm not going to cover it too much actually, but this is a conditional statement, and we need to create the isSet method. So public function isSet name will always return a Boolean, return array key exists, cool, the name within our internal properties array. Excellent. And we also want to be able to set the value as well. So public function set name with a value. This will return itself for the time being. And this properties name equals a value. Cool. Right, this is going to be either a string or an integer for the time being, and value will be mixed. We're going to say we accept anything. This is very, very loose typed, and most of the time you don't like loose typing, but at the base architecture level, we're kind of happy with it. We're kind of happy that that's going to be the case. So here, string or an integer. And here I'm going to say is a string or an integer. We can put some asserts in later if we wanted to. Okay, right. To test that, we can do public function test get set. You know what? I'm just going to copy this. Object set name Bob. That'll just do. Oops. Oh my god, I can't even type. Right, var dump object. We should just have a single property of Bob. Ta-da! Name Bob. Cool. Thanks, Bob. So we set it, and we can assert that it exists. So assert equals Bob object get name. Should run. Done. Excellent. Okay, moving back into our basic object, we now have set, we have get, and we have isSet. But we also want to be able to use functions and magic methods for accessing and setting data. So we're going to be adding in some magic methods. Yay, magic methods. We use them because they are magic. Okay, get first of all, and then we're going to implement function for isSet. And we also going to be adding in a function for set. Cool. So it's added in the method stubs for us. I'm just going to put some DocBlocks on here. Right. Okay. So it's going to return. So here we're going to return this get name. That one's pretty easy. The return of this is mixed because that's what our return is for get. In fact, let's just put that as our default. And then isSet will be a Boolean. It's always going to return a Boolean. So return this isSet name. And then set is going to be a void because it doesn't return anything. And we're just going to do this set name value. Cool. The value can be mixed. The name, we're expecting a string or an integer if we remembered that. And same here, string or an integer. And return type. Oops. The nice thing about PHP Storm actually is I can just do this. Cool. That was just an alt to enter shortcut. I'm skipping through this because, as I said, there's a lot to get through. I hope I'm not losing anyone. But okay, so we've added in some magic methods for get, set, and isSet. And that means we can now start accessing the internal properties from within the internal properties array using these magic methods. And how we do that in this scenario would be in so here I'm just going to change our name here to object name equals Steve, and I shall just var dump out our object just so you can see the name changing. Boom, that's using a magic method. The name has now changed to Steve. So if you don't know about magic methods, I recommend you look them up. This does highlight and throws like a small warning here. That's acceptable at our base level object, so we're just going to move on. So we can just assert equals Steve in object name. Again, we're using a magic method. This time, instead of an assignment, we're using a get. So this is now going through to the get magic method. This is an assignment going through to the set magic method. We can also assert true that isSet object name, because that has been set through this magic method. So we run this and it functions. Great. Okay, so the next thing we want to be able to do is to be able to remove a property from our internal properties array. To do that, we're going to be using unset. We want to be able to use an unset function as well as an unset method. So we're going to be using this unset name. If this, not that, this is set name, unset this properties name, return this, this allows us to use the method programmatically. And we also want a magic method so we can use a function. Right. Unset name. And that's going to be a string or an integer. Excellent. Okay, we can test that. Public function test unset. This is removing a property. We're going to assume we already have one. And we're going to unset object name. Using the magic method, that should now pass into our unset magic method. And we should end up with an empty array. Let's test it out. And we have an empty array. How can we test that? Well, we need to find out how many properties there are, or whether this object has properties in this scenario. So we're going to add that into. So we'll head back on into our basic object, and we're going to add a length to find out how many properties we have. So function length is going to be an integer. This will return a count of this properties. So that's how many items we have within our internal array. Now we also want to be able to determine whether we have properties. So this has properties. This will be a Boolean returning this length is greater than 0. All right. So in our test, we can now say this assert false because it shouldn't have any properties, has properties. Ta-da! Okay, cool. That's that done. Excellent. We also might want to be able to rename a property. So we've been able to get, set, unset, basically add. So let's next try and rename a property. So we'll head on back into our object, and we're going to add it in here. So we want to be able to public function rename a old key to a new key. So we're assuming this is going to be an associative array. Okay, basic object return this. Our old key, sorry, I'll just set this to this. This should be a string or an integer. This should be a string or an integer. We think, actually no, it should normally, when you're renaming, we're just going to say that we're going to accept a key which is associated with an associative array. So we'll just assume that the key you wish to rename and the new name for that key. All right, so we don't want to return any errors, so we want to make this nice and fluid. So it'll just bypass if they can't find the old key. That is sometimes desirable when you're manipulating version controlled data. So that is desirable in this situation as a base object. But if you didn't want that to be the case, you would put in some kind of exception handler in any object which extends your basic object. But by default, we're just going to say if this does not have a old key, we're just going to return this. Simple as that. Okay, so first of all, we need to get the current list of keys within our associative array. That does not exist. We are going to add it in here. Public function keys should be an array and is going to return array keys for this properties. Simple as that. Okay, and so that's now added in there. Then we're going to do the actual renaming bit, which is to find for the array, find within our current array, sorry, array search. Yep. the old key inside our existing keys, and we're going to assign it a new key. Simple as that. And then this properties is equal to an array combine, which basically takes the same length of arrays containing, so this is my keys, it should have the same length as the internal properties, marries them together, we end up with a new name. We can test that. Hopefully. Okay, so here we want to rename object, rename name, whoops, to first name, let's say. And we're going to var dump out object. And as you can see here, it was set as name. We've renamed name to first name, and it now appears in our internal array. Yeah, hurrah! Wait, okay, we can move on. Oh, no, we can't, because we need to do a test. So this assert false object, we can do an isSet. Let's do an isSet object name using our magic methods, and assert true isSet object first name. Run it, and it's done it. Okay, so that's the boring, mundane, everyday stuff out of the way. So how can we make this a little bit better? The first thing I want to be able to do is make this object a little bit more versatile, because that will help me when it comes to merging and managing data coming in from other areas. So what we want to be able to do is allow our construct to be able to accept more than just an array. We want to be able to accept maybe a standard class, and also we want to be able to accept objects of its own type. Clean up code. Cool. Right, so that means we have to go down to set properties, and again, properties in here is an array, a standard class, or a basic object. And to achieve that, we are going to resolve these properties somehow. So to do that, I'm going to add a new method up here, which is protected because I don't want to be able to use it externally, but I do want to be able to use it internally, potentially within objects which extend this one. So resolve properties. Wow, okay. Properties. This is always going to return an array. All right, and again, incoming is an array, standard class, or a basic object. Right, if the properties inbound is an instance of basic object, we know that we can return its properties. So properties get properties, right? Because that's what we did earlier. If the properties are an instance of standard class, we can return a conversion, basically. Array of properties that will convert a standard class into an array. And if it's otherwise, if it's not an array, if not is an array, properties, or rather if is array, properties return properties. In all other instances, throw a new exception. So invalid argument exception, expected an array, standard class, or basic object. That'll do for now. All right, let's just tidy this up a little bit. Okay, so how can we use this? We use this down here. So set properties is this, resolve properties, properties. That should work, right? Okay, to test that, before we get started onto other things, we are going to test the same. Probably, I think we'll probably test it up here as well. So standard equals new basic object. No. I'm losing the plot. Okay, is new standard class. That's what I was after. Clean up code. And we want to be able to do standard class first name equals Bob again. I'm not going to go into as much detail on this one. So a secondary object, so object 2, perhaps is equal to a new basic object with standard class. So hopefully this should var dump out a secondary object with the properties converted into an array. Haha, what a relief, it does. Okay, so that's good. That allows us to move on. I'm going to delete that for the time being. That allows us to move on to merging data. This is where it starts getting interesting because it allows us to accept standard classes, arrays from perhaps like you're reading a JSON file as a standard class, or you might be reading it as an array. You might get data out of a database from an array as an array or as a standard class. Or both. It might be you got an array of standard classes. Okay, so this allows us to handle that. And we can merge data. So that's the thing we want to be able to do now, is to be able to merge some data into more data. So let's add it here. So public function merge properties, again loose typed. Basic object. Return this. This properties equals array merge. This properties, and we want to take this resolve properties of the new properties being merged into our existing properties. And that is an array, a standard class, and a basic object. Cool. Right. Okay. We can test that in a little bit. We also want to be able to do the opposite of this, which is to extend AB warrior. Okay. I can't even think. Extend properties, and is basically the opposite way around. So we've got properties internal, which are extending properties inbound. So cool. To test that, we can do public function test merge. We have a basic object of, do you know what? I'm going to do an object equals new basic object. This is going to have a first name of an empty string and a last name of an empty string, and we are going to merge an array. Do you know what? Actually, I'm going to merge in a standard class just to prove a point. Standard equals new standard class. Standard first name has to be exactly the same for obvious reasons, but it doesn't have to be the complete object. So we're missing last name. If we now var dump this out, we should end up with an object with a complete first name but an empty last name. There we go. Complete first name, empty last name. Awesome. With that now done, we can actually create a test for it. So we just do this assert equals Bob is inside object first name. Just test that. We got our tick. We're happy. We can move on. Awesome. Next, what is next? We've done merge, we've done extend. For now, I'm just not going to do extend because it's basically the opposite way around. We want to be able to implement the iterator interface. Yeah, so we want to be able to iterate across the properties within our internal properties array as if from an external source. So what we want to be able to do, if I just do this, so public function test iterator, we basically want to be able to do, let's just copy this. Steve, let's just mix it up a bit, hey? Stevenson, Steve Stevenson. It's an imaginative name. Okay, what we want to be able to do is this. So for each object as property name, oops, value. All right, we want to be able to do a var dump of each. So var dump property name, var dump of value. Okay, this is going to error. Okay. Wait, what? It hasn't done anything because, do you know what? It should have errored because it shouldn't actually be capable of iterating across this. But it's not actually doing anything. That's a spelling mistake. Oh gosh, that's a spelling mistake. Get rid of the spelling mistakes. Okay, we actually want to be able to iterate through this. We can't because it doesn't implement the iterator interface. So we need to add it, implements iterator. That's it. Add method stubs. Whoops. This is what we need to be able to do an iterator. It's actually not that difficult. Okay, so essentially this one will be return current, this properties. All right, next will be returns void. So we will do, let's see, what have we got here? Well, it'll just be next this properties. Key will be basically the same, I think. Where am I? Return key this properties. And we want valid must be a Boolean. So the valid will be return, whoops, I guess it will be this key not equals null. Because that's a key. It returns null on failure. So it's not valid if it's null. So this key should not equal null and then it's valid. Cool. Okay, well, I guess that works. Next one is rewind. Rewind will be reset this properties. Cool. That's a void, so we don't need to return anything. That's a void, so we don't need to return anything. Happy days. Okay, so now in here, hopefully, there we go. Hey, we've iterated across our object. That didn't work before. Okay. I'm not sure what I can do for tests on this. I can probably put in a index. Okay, and I'll probably have an expected is an array. I'm just going to use the keys for now. So first name and last name. And I'll do this assert equals expected index plus plus, and it will be property name. Let's just try it. Done. Happy days. Okay, that's that done. We've been able to iterate across our object properties. Okay, so we want to be able to take data out of a database and perhaps apply it to an API. We also want to be able to extract data from a JSON config file perhaps, and to be able to supply and manipulate that data and then supply it back as JSON. So we're going to implement the JSON serialize interface so we can actually do that. So we shall go up to our top here and implement JsonSerializable. I'm just going to add the method stubs in automatically, clean up our code here. This is quite simply just going to return our internal properties. That just allows JSON encode to gain access to our internal properties. That's pretty much it. We don't care about how that works, or whether the internal properties within each element are capable of being converted into JSON. That's their responsibility as part of single responsibility. As far as the basic object is concerned, it doesn't care. Okay, right. So, but we also want to be able to access that quite nicely. So we'll just do public function to JSON as a string. We can standardize our output. So return that. This is a kind of an opinionated view of how I prefer my JSON to be returned. You can put your own options in, or you can add them as an argument to our toJSON method. But to test that working, we're going to add a new method here, test toJSON, and I'm going to copy this. Going to change the name to John Johnson. I actually had a guy called John Johnson call me once, so it's a real guy. Hi, John. Okay, what was I doing? This. Oh, no, we're just going to var dump it out so you can see it. Var dump object to JSON. There we go. We got a valid JSON object being returned as a string. Great. Okay, let's just assert just so we can is string, something like that. Okay, that's all we need to do, just to make sure it's not erroring out. Whoa. Okay. Basic object test where assert is string. Okay, this is just assert true is string. I don't know why that errored out. I'll look at that later. I don't care. Okay, I just want to get a tick. Cool. That's it. This is quite a long video, so you'll be pleased to hear that we're down to our last couple of things. That's going to make this base object super powerful, and will also help us address a couple of little niggles that we've got hanging about over here. Right, okay, so the last thing we're going to do is implement getter setter methods using magic method. And we've already done it with properties because we've done it here, but we actually want to be able to do something along the lines of this. So test getter setter, something like that. So object equals new basic object. What we want to be able to do is set first name to John. That's what we want to be able to do. This is going to error. Undefined method. Oh no. Okay, to get around that, what we're going to do is implement a call method. This is going to intercept that call and say, well, you know what? I know that doesn't exist, but I'm going to try and do something about it. So if preg match, we're getting into regular expressions here, guys. So I'm not going to explain much about regular expressions. I guess you could look into how these work yourselves. Yeah, that's up to you guys. You know. So we're following a design pattern here. So we're saying we want to get set with at least a letter after it. I think that's what this is saying. Okay. That's our pattern. Our string is the name. And then we have the matches coming out of the regular expression match. So matches. If this matches, wow, okay, that was terrible. Our action, geez, man. Our action is equal to matches 1 because that's our first group. And our property is, I did it again, look. Our property is matches 2 because that's our second group. And I want to lowercase the first character of my match because that's this. I want to make that lowercase. So in the case of like first name, this will be a string. It's always a string. And this will be an array. So in this case, we are converting something like get first name to first name. Basically, that's what we're doing. That's what this is doing. Right. So let's just add an exception in here. Okay. So import class runtime exception. Okay. What we're saying is if we don't have this property, we can't set it by a method. So I don't know whether that's desirable or not, but yeah, generally speaking, it is desirable. If you're using methods, then we're just going to say that it doesn't exist. Then what we're going to do is we're going to push the property into the arguments array. So array unshift into arguments the property that we found. This basically allows us to go directly to the get or set method. So return call user function array. I think it's this action. That's a callable as an array, and then arguments. This is why this bit here is quite intermediate, because we're using regular expressions. We're dealing with injecting a property into an array, and we're calling a function which is either get or set with the amended arguments using a call user function array. I'm also going to just say if we can't validate this, then we should throw an exception again. What's going on here? Return tag. Return mixed. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. All right. So this is hopefully going to throw an exception. But if we were to say add something in here, first name is blank. it's working. We just need to validate that it is working. Debug var dump object. All right, it's working. That's cool. That's cool. But you know what's not cool is the fact that this is still giving us an error. Look, I can't click on this. I can't click on that. And it's also not going to autocomplete. That's a problem. But we can still prove this. We can still, you know, like assert true. Sorry, not assert true. Assert equals. We can still validate our test. So assert true is object get first name. There we go. So we've got getter, sorry, that's a setter, and we've got a getter over here. But they're causing us some problems. Now there's a reason for that. Obviously PHP Storm cannot resolve the fact that these exist because the code is too complicated for it to do so. But there is a way around this, and it doesn't really matter at the base object level because, you know, we shouldn't be worrying about it just here. But what we do want to do is make sure that we can actually get some auto completion working and make sure that our code validates and we don't get these kind of nasty ticks all over the place. Okay, so how do we do that? What are we going to do? That's the responsibility of extending classes. So to do that, I'm going to create a new class and I'm going to create a new test as well. So person test. Namespace is PHP nuts class person test extends test case. All right. Right. Now I'm going to create my namespace here again. PHP nuts class person extends basic object. So we're getting into inheritance. Public function construct. We want properties, and we're going to do this merge properties. We're going to have some defaults. First name and last name. Okay, so that should work. This should be the same as we did before, so it's going to be a standard class. And in this case, we want it to be another person. So we generally want it to be the same. We could put some validation in, but we're not going to. Okay, right. Person equals new person. Okay. We're going to var dump our person. Okay, we got our first name and last name. They're empty. And what we want to be able to do is do person set first name to Bob. Hey, Bob's back. All right. So it is working, but it's still telling us that this is wrong. So we can get around that in our PHP DocBlocks. And we can say, well, method, which will return a string, is get first name, and our method, which returns this, will be set first name, which expects a string of name. Go back into our person test. So by virtue of the fact that we've now added in these DocBlocks, the person test now PHP Storm now recognizes the fact that that should exist. And if I can roll over it and I can click on it, and it'll take me to the line where that's defined. This should still work, which it does. And I can also now, because I've added in a DocBlock, this assert equals Bob person get, and here we go. Our magic method is recognized by the fact that we added in our DocBlocks. All right. And we got a green tick. Huzzah! We've accomplished a huge amount. This basic object is now ready to rock and roll, and we can implement it into so many scenarios. We've just done one basic one here with person. You could implement it into, as I said before, config file management, database management, calculations, dynamic, whatever you want. Okay, this forms the foundation of a large number of objects. And that's why this is the best object you will ever write. Oh God, I'm tired. I need a rest. You need a rest. I'm sure you need a rest. If you made it this far, oh my God, you're amazing. And if you made it this far and you want to see more content like this, and you want to have more PHP madness or PHP nuts, yeah, if you want to have more PHP nutty nutness, please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.